Worldwide, farmers grow enough food, more than enough, to feed the world. The question that comes up from this is why, then, are people still going hungry? On this week's Bottom Line, Melancon takes a look at the supply chain that sometimes doesn't always work the way we think it does.
The Bottom Line is brought to you by the Cotton Board, strengthening the fiber of our industry.
One of the big stories of last year was the Ebola epidemic in Western African countries and how far it would spread. In the wake of the disease being contained, however, a new threat emerged, that of widespread famine. In the case of West Africa, the supply chain is very simple. With 2/3 of the 22 million people living in West Africa relying on subsistence farming as their livelihoods, if they're too scared to go into the fields to farm, the food just simply isn't made. Many people in Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea have feared contracting the disease, so they literally never left home. In the meantime, most of the households there have already cut their already thin rations because they could not afford more food as prices rise. That's supply and demand, and more importantly, it illustrates how we produce more than enough food but can't necessarily get it to where it goes, in those countries especially because they're dependent upon perishables they produce. Getting it from somewhere else is just not an option because it is so cost prohibitive. We make more than enough food, probably here in Louisiana alone, much less the U.S., to feed all of those people, but how to get it over there is the issue. It's not just West African countries either. We have the same issue here in the U.S. While we don't have the years of civil war followed by an epidemic like Liberia's had, we do have many people in a state of food insecurity, defined as a lack of access to healthy, nutritious food on a day-to-day basis. Again, we produce enough food here in the U.S., but that's at a farm level. It has to be transported, packaged, and shipped to where it needs to go. If it perishes quickly, it then has to be preserved so it doesn't spoil. All of that takes time, effort, and of course, money. In Louisiana, while we produce quite a lot of food we eat, we also import a great deal of fruits and vegetables from California, for example. We have cattle, but those cattle are sent to feedlots in Oklahoma and Texas before they come back to us as beef products of one kind or another. The bottom line is a shrinking supply of farmers means everyone becomes increasingly dependent upon a supply chain in order to get that food. We, of course, grow the safest, most affordable food in the world, but increasingly we're not growing our own food, which means someone else has to do it for us. And of course, Kristen, as we looked at that guy who produced all of that lettuce in that, the hydroponic areas, I mean, he can produce as much lettuce as he wants, but what if somebody has to get it on the East Coast? It's got to get there.
Well, that's what he mentioned. His goal was, not to have a big factory or greenhouse of production. He wanted to have an operation like he had in every major city so that all food was accessible and locally produced. And it's a great idea. It's just, how are you going to accomplish that?
It's got to start with some money.
That's true. Neil Melancon. Well, that does it for this edition of TWILA. Be sure to join us next week when we'll get you ready for the big Fat Tuesday celebrations with a couple of special Mardi Gras stories. Until then, you can watch any of our stories online or on our website, twilatv.org. And be sure to follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook. For all of us here at TWILA, I'm Kristen Oakes. Thanks for joining us. We hope to see you again right here next week.